Ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the end of this unit, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 17 today in kind of one foul swoop, because it all falls under the umbrella of progressivism. So we talked about it in class a little bit, but we're in this era where things are requiring change. We need to change the way that we do sanitation. We need to change the way that we do transportation. We need to change the way that we do working conditions. And so in order to do so, we've ushered into the progressive era. The root word of progressive is progress. And we're moving into a time period where these changes are really going to kind of dictate where our country goes in the next few years. So in the progressive movement, we used different efforts and different practices to increase the government role in people's lives. So there was government intervention in working conditions, government intervention in education, government intervention in healthcare, government intervention in all different facets of society. And as a result of that, we have some people who were kind of anti-progressive, to be honest, but it was necessary because we had this issue of rapid urbanization, rapid industrialization, and rapid settlement of these cities, hence urbanization. So we had to kind of stop and go, wait a minute, what we're doing is not necessarily the best for society. So we've got to be making some change and making some reforms. Who kind of fueled the progressive movement? It was educated people, writers, scholars, teachers. Teachers are very educated. And they typically were people who were in the middle class in cities who were witnessing how the poor were either being treated or the facilities that the poor had access to. And so they wanted to take some action and really help out the poor that were in these urban situations. There were four main goals of the progressive movement. So you're going to want to write this down. Four main goals of the progressive movement. The first one was to protect social welfare. And what that meant was they wanted to protect society and protect the welfare of the people who were in society. So they wanted to do things that would help give them community areas. They wanted to relieve urban problems. People wanted to get rid of these situations that they were put in because of harsh industrialization. So they set up things like settlement houses, the YMCA, and what they did is at these places, it'd be like a community center. So you could go to the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, and you could play basketball. They had swimming pools. They opened libraries. They sponsored classes. The settlement houses centered around the idea of social activism, so how people were helping other people there. You could go there if you'd had some sort of a situation where your family had broken apart, or it was a gathering area where people felt safe and knew that other community members were going to be there as well. So it was a gathering area. So to protect social welfare, we were looking to protect the rights of people and the social parts of people. So to protect people when they were not at work. They wanted, one of the goals of the progressive movement was to promote moral reform, which is kind of a controversial idea because whose morals are we promoting? Who's to say that one person's morals are better than the others? But at any rate, a couple things that happened with the progressive movement is they pushed prohibition. And prohibition was the idea that alcohol would be banned. It was seen as something that would incite poor decision making. And the WCTU, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, promoted this goal of prohibition, which is the big kind of moral reform there. And Carrie Nation was the leader of, she was one of the leaders, I should say, of the WCTU. And according to the leaders, what the goal of the WCTU was to bless and brighten every place she enters and enter every place. So they went around in kind of this weird rampage to different bars, and they would bring axes into bars and smash bottles and tell people that they were going to essentially burn in hell if they drank alcohol. So there were some links socially to situations that happened as a result of involvement with alcohol. So there was some validity to it, but it was a little bit extreme, I think. They wanted to create economic reform, looking to the idea of socialism. So socialism comes under the umbrella of communism, but they were looking to kind of see how the government could get involved and help establish economic regulations. Big businesses with the robber barons were corrupt. The government was corrupt. Laborers were in trouble because they didn't have good working conditions, so there was corruption in the workplace because people were trying to bribe people. It was a really difficult time for people to be in this country because, especially in the industrialized parts of the country, because everything seemed to be corrupt. And muckrakers are the writers who talked about corruption, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in Unit 2. And the last goal of the progressive movement was to foster efficiency. And what they meant by that is looking into the idea or the concept of scientific management to make the workplace more efficient. So what they're going to do is apply scientific methods and scientific principles to tasks to make them simpler and easier. So it would be more productive at work, on an assembly line type thing, to make the economy more stable and to make the workplace more efficient in terms of production numbers. So the progressive movement looked to do these 4 things: promote moral reform, protect social welfare, create economic reform, and to foster efficiency. And there was lots of different places within society that they applied these different things. They did it for children. We talked about child labor at the beginning of this union. So they were looking to help children by using government intervention in child labor laws and things of that nature. So they were looking to promote social welfare of young people at work. They were trying to promote social welfare for people who may not have a great condition at home. So they had these settlement houses in the YMCA to go to. If you look at the children in the upper right, it doesn't seem like they have, the kind of life that a child should have, just kind of hanging out. No toys, nothing really productive that they're doing. And then you've got an immigrant family in the lower left-hand corner in their tenement house. So we're trying to reform also how people are living and establish some regulations for how people can live. Here again is the tenement house. I believe I showed this picture in another video. But again, the idea that people are living, 6, 10, 12 people in a small apartment because of the fact that it's expensive and they don't have anywhere else to go. They also were reforming education. This is how education used to be, particularly in the time of typhoid. There were a number of communicable diseases that were happening, and so the kids would go to school, and because people believed that typhoid cycled around in the air that you breathed in, they would open up the windows in the winter, and each student had to sit in their coat and a hat in order to be able to learn. So kind of a bizarre way of looking at education, but they wanted to promote that. Also, with the idea of reform and progressivism, this is Susan B. Anthony, and we're looking to advance the rights for women in the workforce. So Chapter 17, Section 2 talks about women in public life and about how people were moving forwards in taking women out of the home and putting them in the workforce and giving them equal rights in society. So farm women typically were in charge of raising the kids, doing the kitchen type work, those types of things. But they also had to step in if their husbands were ever ill and operate the farm, which was not something that a whole lot of people really promoted, but it's what had to be done. Also, they were looking to try and educate women and send them to school and give them the same opportunities that men would have. They also were looking to bring women into the workforce, which in some cases ended up turning on them because the environment and the conditions weren't the greatest. But they did start involving women in industry at the turn of the century and in this time period. A lot of women also became leaders in the reform movement. So when we talk about who was involved, people like Susan B. Anthony, like Carrie Nation, there were a lot of women leaders promoting change, mostly because they were part of the groups that had been slighted in the past. So we're looking for change among immigrant families, poor people, African American communities, women. And one of the things that women are fighting for at this time, particularly under the leadership of Susan B. Anthony, are the women's rights and women's rights to vote. And so this is where the Declaration of Sentiments assignment comes in, as you'll be looking at the different grievances that women had with relation to what was happening with them and their lack of rights at this time period. So educated women participated in these reform groups and provided leadership for different people to actually, be able to move forward and be productive in these different roles.